Gonna do that again for those of you that are just getting up to speed on it. So we've got this woman waving her wafty chiffons around or whatever. Veils. Dancing with veils. And we want to just key that. So we got you should all be in NukeX, where we got a key light that works. Okay, and then press on the little black box in key light up there in the top right, and then holding down the control key, we're just going to select a bit of the green area. It should turn the green screen to black grey. Press A for alpha, so we can see the alpha channel. Okay, and then up in the key light, just going to pull the screen gain up so that so we get a sort of good black around her. Most of her solid bits should be white. Okay, so you've got that keyed. So I'm not sure everyone did, but we need to go to settings. So press S for settings. And we're going to just shorten the sequence to 150 frames there in the settings. And we want to make the format HD 1080. Okay, should be fine. So it's 150 frames duration and HD 1080 in the settings. We'll keep it at 24 frames per second, that's fine. Okay, so we got our woman keyed there. We need to just cut away the studio. If you haven't done that already, we need to tab up a roto. And that roto needs to be plugged into the input called out M. So it's going to be an outer mat that garbage mats away all the rubbish around her. Okay, so make a bezier around her, not too close to her. Just yeah, I know some of you have done this. That's fine. You guys who've done it already, you can start keyframing that roto through the sequence. It doesn't need much keyframing because she doesn't move that much, but okay, so that's put a roto spline around her. If you double click on the key light, and we're going to switch that on now. So in the bottom of the key light attributes, there's the out M component, which is set to none at the moment. Just click on that. I think it's drag it down from none to inverted alpha, and you should see all of the studio rubbish disappear now. If you look at the bottom, though, it cuts through her shadow quite harshly there. So what you want to do is go to the roto and turn the feathering up so that there's a sort of soft edge on the roto. You just go to roto, and there's a function called feather. I just dragged it up to 14. All right, and back over the picture. Press A again. We get the image back. It should look like that. So I'm just plugging in the warehouse still as a background into the BG input of the key light. Okay, and then in the key light, go to that top tab. You take it from final result to composite, so we can see it. We can see her on that background. Okay. So plug in the warehouse into the BG, yeah, and then switch it from final result to composite, and that will show you everything on the background. So let's assume this is like one shot from your pop promo that you're making of a dancing girl in a warehouse. You've got this sort of this establishing shot, and it's been just filmed. It's just been filmed. You've only got this like little green screen studio, so you really wanted this great big sort of shot where the camera zooms in across the warehouse to reveal the pop star or whatever. Okay, well, you can't really shoot that in camera in this little studio that we've got. So all done is we've captured we've captured her just doing the dance on the spot in the space that we have. But what we really want to do is get a shot. Yeah, you can. Yeah, we will do. We're going to put her in halfway down the room and then move down. You could just put a transform just after the green screen and scale her down that way as a rough way of doing it. There's overall scale here somewhere. Yeah, I'll just do it. So one way we could do it is we could comp the woman into this big high resolution background image, and you could just animate the scale so it looks like a camera is moving towards her. But the problem with it is this is just a 2D image, and it's really obvious when you do that. It just looks like a camera that's zooming in rather than a camera that's moving towards her, right? When I do that, it's not the same. You know, imagine she was down there. We could just zoom up. You could just scale in towards her, but that's not the ideal solution. What we really want to do is turn this 2D footage or still background into a 3D environment that we can then put her in, and then we can actually move a camera towards her through that environment, right? So Nuke lets us sort of turn this 2D scene into a 3D one. It's a kind of trick 3D scene because it's a 3D scene that you still have to view from this angle. You can't just decide to put the camera on the other side of the room and shoot backwards the other way, because there is so what we're going to do is we're going to set up this warehouse scene as a 3D projection, which we can then put the chroma key the woman into it, and we can move a camera towards her and get that effect that we were shooting in a big space when we were actually just shooting her in a small green screen environment. Okay. So we're just going to take that background out of the chroma key for now, and we're going to work on this, turning this this 2D image into a 3D scene that we can use and make an environment in. So what we're going to do is we're going to break this this scene down into some 3D sort of sections. Okay, we're going to have a floor, wall, a back wall, and a ceiling for this one. Okay, and each of those they're all just going to be flat shapes that have been manipulated in 3D space, and then we project the image onto each one, so that they actually we can actually move through them. Okay, and like a different scene, like maybe like this this other environment, this probably be a simpler one. It would just be like a single flat plane with the ground on, and then we would have another flat plane facing the camera in the distance with the back, with the sky and the mountains on it. Okay, but this interior is like going to be made up of 4 pieces. Okay. I'm just going to change the workspace a minute back to compositing. So we got a menu of 3D functions over here. We're just gonna look at the main ones, the most important ones here for today. I'll go back. I prefer my large viewer; it's easier to see. So I'm going to tab up a scene. Okay, and I'm going to tab up a camera. So these are 3D nodes. They stand out. They're circles, so they're easy to spot. I think they're all red things as well. And we're also going to get a scanline renderer, which is also red but not circular. Okay, so a scene will will turn our 2D world into a 3D world. It adds a Z dimension basically. Okay, and that's this is sort of the node where all the elements that you're comping together, they all sort of meet up in here in this environment. Okay. That needs to be plugged into a camera. The camera is what actually looks at that environment and gives you a 2D representation back of whatever you're looking at. Okay. And the scanline renderer is what gives you that 2D image back. It renders that 2D image back from the combination of the camera and the scene. Okay, so that's got to be plugged into the camera and the scene. And you can see that. So those 3 parts make up a 3D environment scene, which we can now populate with our 2D bits and pieces and other elements. So yeah, if you tab it, it's a scene, a camera, and a scanline render. We click on the scene. Up here, we can actually switch from our 2D view into our 3D environment. And those of you that do animation and done some 3D, this look fairly familiar sort of environment for 3D. Okay. Right. So to navigate this 3D environment, it's a little bit different to Maya, unfortunately. You need to hold down Alt. Alt is the important. Okay, so your first mouse button lets you track. I think that's called. Lets you move it around relatively. The right mouse button lets you rotate or gimbal around it. You can use your scroll wheel to zoom. Okay, so we have a camera which sort of shows our view and what it's looking at in the 4 lines there. It's got a depth, so Z depth, vertical height, X and Y. Yeah, left and right mouse button with Alt. So have a go at that. All right, we're going to look at our warehouse again now. So we're going to make a flat panel in our 3D environment, which we're going to project the floor onto, and we need to line up with our image as best as possible in the 3D scene that we've just seen there. Okay, so we get these things called cards. They're called cards, and they're just like flat squares that you can project onto. Don't use card 3D. That's a different thing. That's a card that has all of the camera and everything built into it, but we've already built a camera and scene set up, so we just want the one called card. Okay, that makes a piece of sort of invisible geometry that I think we might see it. And so here's our card. You drag it down the Z, and we might see it in our 2D view. No, you can't actually see it. Unless we're not looking at the no, but we can plug things into this card to make it visible. What we're going to put in it first is a grid, so that we can line up our not a grid. It's a tab, right? Grid. Right, we plug the grid into the card. So now you've just seen, if you're in the 3D view, you can see our card has become a sort of mesh. It's very thin lines, so we'll just bump the size up to 10. Right, now we can really see it. That just gives us a visual of our card that we can then put into the scene. Right, so I plugged that card into the scene. Now, when we view the scanline render, we're looking at our grid there. We can plug. There's a background node in that scanline render where we can put our background in, so we can see the warehouse. So now what we've got to do is we've got to get that grid on the floor and line it up best we can in a sort of in the 3D space, so it actually represents that floor in the best way possible. So we know starting with the floor, we know that it's like it should be on the flat. So the first thing to do would be to just lay that card on its side so that it's flat down. And there's a set of translate functions here. So we rotate it 90 on the X. That flattens it down. Our camera is right in the 0 position at the moment, and in our scene, when we're looking at our scene, you have to jump between 3D and 2D to keep looking back at your scene. It's not that, then the top right up there. We can see our camera is above the ground plane, sort of maybe halfway up the wall. So we should really move our camera as well, so that it represents that in our 3D environment. So you could just zoom in and drag the rather small handle there and pull it up off the ground. If it disappears suddenly, just undo. it can disappear into the void. You can highlight these and you can drag them so that the numbers. So if you find the right, say to move it up and down Z, you can just highlight the Z and then drag on that, holding down the middle mouse button. That will move it that way. Or you can use these little handles, but they're really annoying because they're quite hard to see. You can manipulate it once you've got the. No, you can't. You can manipulate it in the 2D view as well. Okay, I've sort of got it. It's getting there. It's not big enough. I can see it's not long enough the way I've set it up. So just gonna. You can do a uniform scale on it, which will just change the scale of all of it. You don't know where? What's that? That's what you're looking at there. Where's your viewer? Put it on the scanline renderer at the bottom. Just double click the scanline renderer. Yeah. So yeah, if your grid's not there yet, you need to go in the 3D view and just put it somewhere in front of the camera to begin with. Where's your grid? On the floor there. It's probably just too close to the camera, so you need to just move it down so it's within those sort of 4 beams from the camera's view. Yeah, and if you double click your camera and move it up a little bit as well, so because at the moment it's looking straight down the Z axis. So yeah, just a little bit. I think so. Yeah, if the grid is in. Has it appeared yet?
Yeah, but it's far away now. It's around.
Right, just scale it up, make it 5 times bigger than that, or something. If you click on the grid, and then it's got this scale button.
It's very faint. I'll try and put it up higher.
Did you turn it up to thickness of 10 as well?
How do I do that on the grid?
Choose the grid in the grid thing in the. Oh, you are, yeah. Where it says 10:1, change it to 10:10. See number 10, size 1. Change size to 10. That makes your grid lines thicker and makes them easier to see. Right, I've got my floor roughly the right size, but if you look at down the lines of perspective, they're not really lined up with the warehouse, and that's probably because my camera's needs to be sort of looking slightly to the right. So rather than rotating the grid to work, it's better to rotate the camera and keep the grid square to the environment you're in. So you can also rotate the camera, and it needs to rotate on Y to sort of look left and right. So so that lines up. My wall now lines up with the perspective of the camera pretty well. I'll go back to the card, and then I can move the card over. Alright, so that floor one looks pretty good. Maybe it actually should be a little bit lower, so I can move it up and down as well. Now I'm moving it down, it's come away from the back, so I either push it further into Z. Yeah, something, yeah. Okay, so the end of it seems to line up with the back wall. The right-hand side of it lines up with the right wall. So that looks about right. Next thing to do is to Control C, Control V, copy the card. So I just made a copy of that floor card, which can also be plugged into the grid. The grid is just standard; they can be used for all of them. And that new card is now plugged into the scene as well. So we've now got 2 in the same place. But this one, the new one, is going to become my ceiling because it's directly opposite the floor. If it works, it should just move it in Y up to the ceiling. Now my ceiling isn't actually flat. It's got it curves up to a sort of roof. So I'm just gonna pull that enough to cover it. Now it's a little bit short there, so I probably need to make it a bit bigger, that one, to just make sure it all stays in shot. Okay, so that I'm going to name them so we can find them easily. So the first card is floor. Second card, ceiling. just going to make room for 2 more cards. Just move it all up. I'm going to copy again, make another copy. This time, this is a copy of the ceiling. Going to call it let's call it wall. And double click that one, and we need to rotate this so that it makes a right hand wall. The right hand wall. So let's just try. Oops, sorry, it needs to be plugged into the scene or we can't see it. Alright, I need to look at that in the 3D view because it's gone somewhere. Oh yeah, okay. It's in it's turned. So I switched it to 90 in the Y and took off the 90 that was in whatever else it was in it. And it is in the right place, it's a bit too far to the right, so it's gone out of the shot. So, or either that or we're looking straight down it, we can't actually see it in the 3D view. Oh, it's gone over there. So yeah, just needs to be moved to... We know that the end of this grid is the side of our wall, so if we move it there... should be about right. So you see we're sort of building this this room in 3D with just using flat cards. It doesn't matter if they intersect, go through each other. They're better to go through each other than to not actually to have gaps between them. So gonna scale this one down and then so I'm just using the scale functions to get it to roughly the right proportions. And go back to a 2D view. Just check it. Yeah, it's a bit too high. But it's keeping the perspective of the actual room fine, so it's the right camera angle. Sometimes you might need to change the... I mean, I think we were just lucky there that it's the standard sort of size, but you might need to have to change the camera angle. I mean, it's got a focal length of 50. I don't know if that's correct or not, if it's the same as that scene, but it seems to be matching it pretty well. There wasn't any lens distortion to speak of in this background, so that doesn't have to be dealt with either. But so we got 3 out of 4, so we just need to make that last one. So one more copy. There's a copy of the wall itself. So just call it back. And double click that one, and it's no rotation, 0. It's actually facing the camera, so that's fine. And then back to the 3D view to push it to the back of the scene. So you got these. You can look at top, bottom, front view. So there's the orthographic views in the 3D environment. If you want to just double check that you haven't got gaps.
Same for Mac, same as Mac 3D.
Yeah, Maya 3D Max. They all have front, side, top view, maybe two side views, and then a perspective view. So they're all very similar. Can you see? No, it's a bit difficult to see which one you're looking at. You double click on them, it doesn't actually change much in that scene, so it's not quite as good as a proper 3D software for figuring it out. But I'm pretty sure that they're in the right places now. So we can sort of go inside the scene. So we're more or less looking where our camera right, if you hit tab, there's a new node called Project 3D. It comes in, and it's asking for a camera and something to project to go into it. Okay, so the camera that we've got that we're looking at through now is all set up with these 3 planes to project onto. So this camera is going to become our projector basically. We're not actually going to use this camera in the final render. This is just our reference camera in a way. So we're going to unplug it from the scene. And plug it into the projection. And we'll plug the other end into the actual warehouse scene. And the output from that, I think, goes into the cards instead of the grid. And I take the camera that I'm projecting and just make a copy of it, and that's going to be our actual scene camera, which we plug back into the scene and back into the scanline renderer. Okay, so our original camera is going into the project 3D node and projecting the warehouse onto the 4 planes. So now, if we look at that scene in 3D, you can see that those planes have now got that text, that image has been projected onto all 4 planes in the right places from the right angle. That camera. So we've actually got this sort of pretend 3D environment. And like I said, it doesn't work from other angles. It has to sort of always be used from more or less the original angle. But it does mean that we've got an environment that we can now travel into. Okay. So what I did is I made a copy of the camera and plugged it back into the scene down here. So this is now. So because it was a copy of the camera, the first frame is exactly the same as it was originally. So it doesn't even look. It looks the same. You know, jumping between the footage and the camera. Oops, sorry. Jump back to 3D. But this new camera, I can keyframe its position. So I think the main one is the Z. So I put a keyframe there at frame 1, and I put another keyframe at the end at frame 150, where I've actually travelled down into the room, and it does make a pretty convincing 3D environment that's actually, you know, we're actually travelling through now, rather than just zooming into. You know, and not just, I mean, you don't have to just move through it. You could actually, you know, you could move slightly, you know, the camera could move slightly to the right. It could look towards that wall slightly. You can see as we start going too far, all the projections start looking weirder and weirder and distorted. So you can't veer off a huge amount, but it's definitely gives you a nice, convincing 3D environment to go through. So. Just playing it forwards. Okay, so that's the background, and of course our chroma keyed woman, she can be in there too, and we just take that that whole bit of the tree, just put it up a bit higher up. So what we do, we just put her on a card as well. She's got an alpha channel. She's already been chroma keyed. So if we just dial up a new card and literally plug her onto it, and then plug that card into the 3D scene. There she is, yeah. So we just need to put her somewhere in that environment. We can scale the card. We don't need to scale her, so we just it is a bit awkward navigating this environment, I must admit. Might be easier just to, now she's roughly there, to go back to the 2D view. Oh, there she is. She's gone right through the floor, but so we can decide where to put her in the warehouse now. What size to make her. Right, she's too far back, so maybe. Oops. So yeah, if you move her up and down, you can sort of, when it starts cutting through, you know that means you've hit the floor. We want all of her shadow to be in there, so we just raise her slightly higher so that her shadow is visible. Maybe she's still a bit too big. Maybe it's a bit too far back still. I'm actually working on the last frame, so this is like this is as big as she'll ever be in the scene. I'm just looking for when the shadow starts to go through the floor. No, it's not going to, is it? You can always switch to a faster low-res view if it's taking too long. Feedback. Just switched it to 1/4 and it's much faster processing. So that's about right. Let's turn it back to 1:1. So now she's in that scene further back. We can zoom in on her. So that's making a sort of a post-production camera move, making a new camera shot out of something that was filmed with a static camera in a studio, in a small studio. You can definitely get a lot more space. And I don't know if you've seen kind of like large from films and TV where they composite matte paintings and things into scenes where they might replace a whole sky or something. You might have, so you can use this 3D to sort of to put things at different depths. So your sky may be a really big plane right at the back, a long way from the camera, and then foreground elements can be much closer to it, and then you can do these sort of 3D camera moves with a combination of footage and matte paintings and other parts, all in and they all have this believable parallax. That's what we've basically simulated here, is like the parallax effect of the thing being in a real 3D environment when it was actually a 2D piece of art that we've used. We just projected it into a 3D environment so that we can get that parallax effect as the camera moves towards its target. I think right at the end, after if we got time, we'll be touching on doing 3D tracking, which sets you up for stuff you'll be doing in your third year, when you'll be putting CG objects into sort of 2D environments or getting making simulated 3D environments from real environments by tracking in 3D. Yeah, and she's sort of she's she's locked in there because she's in the 3D environment, so it doesn't feel like she's sliding or anything, which is what you might get if you try putting a 2D plate by eye into a moving camera shot. I mean, it's not perfect. You can sort of see where the floor plane has got a little bit of the wall there, and they're they're not quite working together, and the ceiling has kind of slightly weird perspective because it wasn't a perfect flat plane, but we've put it on a flat plane. But even if this was a very subtle shot, you really get a very believable feel of it being more realistic than if you just did the first example I showed you, where we just zoom in on a 2D plate on a 2D background. All right. Well, I think Moodle's recorded all of that, so if you need to go over it again, it's worth setting up and playing around with it. You might want to actually experiment with this one, which is a much simpler one, where you literally have one big plane flat to the ground and one background plane. All the blue bit and the top part of the picture could be a vertical plane, and all of the floor could be a floor plane. And because there's no real, you just have to get that floor plane roughly at the right angle with the right horizon, and that would work. This is a very high resolution image as well, so you could put somebody quite far back in that field and zoom right in on them, and it would keep the resolution of the background and still look pretty good. You know what I mean? You could zoom right in to sort of have someone there who starts off really small at the beginning, and it would be should be quite convincing, really. You would have to put this a lot further away than we did that interior scene. Big distances, big. I don't know. It shouldn't. It's a high resolution image, so you should be able to zoom in this far. Which is like a lot further than we did with that warehouse. Which means that the woman might be only this big at the beginning of the shot. You know what I mean? And zoom in, see her full body. That look quite good. And that one is probably be a lot quicker to do because you've only got the two planes to add in, and they're both 90 degrees to the camera. So have a go if you have a chance. I know you're all busy with your project work, so I'll come around and we can discuss that next.